Welcome to another writing video from from me. First off, before we get into it, I want to thank everybody for hitting the subscribe button. I want to thank everybody for watching 30 seconds or more of each ad. That helps us. That gets us paid. That's what we're here for. Let's be honest. And also thanks for the people who are sharing these videos, who are letting other authors and other people know. What's fun is it's not just authors that are watching these writing videos. It's just readers. It's people, because these videos are my opinion on things. Okay, so this is the way I do things. So we're not going to get into big, heavy political stuff. We're not going to get into big stuff like AI and all that. I don't want to do those videos. Everybody's doing those videos. I'm going to do more fun videos, more things of, hey, this is how I screwed up a specific part of the writing journey in my 35 plus year career. And maybe you'll learn something from that and you won't make the same dumb mistakes. This we're going to do something a little different. We've done one of these before. I think we did Elmore Leonard's 10 Rules of Writing or whatever. This is George Orwell's 6 Rules for Writing. Okay. And I got this from, there's a bunch of places that have this online. So if you just go George Orwell's 6 Rules for Writing, you'll find the list. Other people have done articles and different things on their opinions on it. Well, this is Armand's opinion on these 6 rules for writing. I got this from Infusion Media, okay, from their blog. So give shout out to them. Credit where credit is due. And so George Orwell, everybody knows who George Orwell is. If you don't know who he is, then that's on you. So I'm going to read a quick thing that they had posted. George Orwell published his essay, Politics and the English Language, in April 1946, after a Second World War and one of the most extensive uses of propaganda in an era of mass media. In the essay, he offers an argument and guidance for clear writing. Modern English, especially written English, is full of bad habits which spread by imitation and which can be avoided if one is willing to take the necessary trouble. So, write better. So here's his 6 rules. I kind of go over each one. I don't even know how long this video is going to be. I'm sure I'll go off into the weeds somewhere. I got to clean my glasses right now. This is all staying in the video, by the way. No edits. Who needs edits? Oh, that made it even worse. Oh, much better. Now I can... No, it's still got a spot on it. What's going on? I'm going to do 20 minutes of me cleaning my glasses. This will be the whole video. Okay, Orwell's 6 rules for writing. These rules sound elementary, and so they are, but they demand a deep change of attitude in anyone who has grown used to writing in the style now fashionable. Again, this is written 80 years ago. So we're still using this stuff. We're still thinking about it. To guide writers into writing clearly and truthfully, Orwell proposed the following 6 rules. Number 1, never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. So that's a good one. That's an interesting one. A cliche. Don't use what everybody else is using out there. Okay, because I think that it's been done to death, especially now, especially 80 years later. I mean, I can only imagine when he wrote this, all of the metaphors and figures of speech and whatnot that were old then, that were cliche then, that have been used all the time. Okay, especially in newspapers and books and all that. I mean, now we social media. I mean, you're just getting beat up over this stuff all the time, and a lot of people use a lot of cliches, and a lot of use them wrong, which is funny. I'll never forget a person I was with that once said, "Oh, he's not a good person. He's from the wrong side of the town." And I said, "You mean wrong side of the tracks?" And she's like, I've never heard that. And she was serious. She also wasn't the sharpest crayon in the box, which is another good one. So, try not to use the cliches, which is what I call them. Try not to use them all the time. I use them in my stories sometimes. Yeah. A lot of times though, I use them wrong. I use them as a to show a character maybe isn't as smart as they think they are. So you can still use them, but try to use them in a more of a unique way. I don't know. Anyway, that's number one. Number two, never use a long word where a short one will do. So I think I've told this story once. I was a manager for a retail store, one of those anchor stores in a mall. And there was a young girl who was working for me, and she was in college. And she wrote this, she had to write a story for like a creative writing class or something. And she said, listen, I know you're a writer. Would you read this and let me know before I turn it in? And I read it, and I was like, what did you use to write this? Now, this is, I don't know, 2003, 2004. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, well, it's like you changed every single word in this. And there was no AI back then. I mean, no AI that anybody was using, whatnot. She had taken she had gone on a thesaurus or a dictionary app or something like that. And basically she went word by word. She wrote this really basic, probably a pretty good story. And she changed almost every single word in it to some big, huge word. And I'm instead of he said or she said, it was he gesticulated, like all these big fancy, and I'm like, you don't need, it doesn't even read like a story. It's just, it just reads weird. So don't use that. If a short one will do, you don't want to have the reader get taken out of the story. As a kid growing up, 12 years old, I was a reader then, but I started reading Dean Koontz books. And he had a lot of big words. The Ice Cream Man. I don't know if you can hear it, but the Ice Cream Man just went by. And so he used a lot of bigger words that I stumbled over as a 12-year-old. And maybe they weren't, maybe I could read some of those words now, who knows? But I was, it took you out of the story. And so for me, as a writer, I never want to do that. I consider myself a pulp fiction writer. So I just want to get to the story. I want the reader to feel like part of the story and read without having to stop and going, let's look and see what gesticulating means, for instance. You know what I mean? I think that's important. I think that's a good one. Number 3, if it is possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. And that's a good one. So there are writers that there's a lot of Stephen King fans out there. I get it. But it seems he's very wordy. He seems like he adds more and more words in his stories. And Dean Koontz Dean Koontz is my favorite author, but there's also a lot that he adds to the story. It's not like they're padding the story. They're adding filler, but they're just like, I don't care. I've done this for long. I could write whatever I want. I get that. If it's possible to cut a word out, always cut. I agree with that one, because a lot of times I write a lot of flash fiction pieces and a lot of short stories. And a lot of times I'm like, well, I can get rid of this word. I can get rid of this sentence doesn't tell anything about the story. And so I've learned a lot on that. And do I make mistakes on that? Of course I do. We all do. But that's a good one. If it's possible to cut a word out, cut the word out, get rid of that word. Don't use it. And you could go through and read it without that word and see if it works, or those words, those sentences, whatever. And I think you write a better story. We're trying to write a good story. We're trying not to hopefully chase a word count. Okay. I love reading horror, but I love reading horror short stories. I think for me, that's my favorite word count, is about a 5,000 word count for a horror story. I don't think you need 50,000 words. I definitely don't think you need 100,000 words to write a horror story. For crime fiction, 63,000 words. That's that sweet spot that I've read all the time, and that's kind of what I write towards. And I think that's perfect. I think that tells a great story. I've read novellas. in horror and crime fiction, and sometimes I think it works. But I think, if you're writing a fantasy book and you're writing 150, 200, 5 billion words, then and if it works, it works. But you should still be trimming those unneeded words. You should, as a writer, as you get better, as you improve as a writer, you realize that the reader's not as dumb as you think. The reader doesn't need everything to be spelled out for them. Description of people and places is a good one that I love to cut words out, because I'm like, you know what? They walked into a dirty strip club. That's literally all you need to tell about that strip club. You don't need to tell with the purple and the yellow and the orange, the lights and the pinks, and what the dancers are wearing and what the bartender looks like, unless it's pertinent to the story, or any of those. You can fill it in with things, but I mean, your main character sits down in a booth in a strip club, and you don't have to explain how dirty the table is or how sticky the seat is or any of that stuff. People know that. People know what a sleazy strip club looks like. If you're talking about a greasy spoon diner at 3 a.m. on the New Jersey Parkway, you don't have to give a ton of description about the place, unless it has to do with the plot, moving the plot along. A lot of times it's the bored waitress at 3 a.m. That's more than enough, because the reader in their mind is going to look, and in their mind they have that picture, because chances are they've run into that bored waitress at 3 a.m. on a New Jersey Parkway diner, and they know that. Again, you're giving ownership to the reader, instead of saying, oh, and then she had dyed red hair and she was chubby and she had too much lipstick on and her eyeliner and her eyelash. You don't need all that stuff. Cut all that out. Number 4, never use the passive where you can use the active. This is something that I struggle with. This is something that, as a writer, I deal with. Okay, so passive voice, active voice. A lot of time, a lot of people don't even understand the difference. I think that's the problem. Most of the time, I don't understand it. I'm gonna be honest with you. Most of the time, I don't even understand the difference. It's the act, not react. Okay, when you're walking into your main character is walking into a scene, or anybody is, you want them to be passive. You want them to move the plot along by their thoughts, their actions, their dialogue, rather than they're just kind of going through the flow. Okay, I don't even know if any of that makes any sense. It makes sense to me. You again, it's ownership by the reader, and you don't want the reader to feel like they're reading one of those what were those books we read as kids? I think some people are still writing the choose your own adventure book. If you get into the boat, go to page 71. If you don't get in the boat and you turn around, go to page 87, like those. Okay, whatever. So I guess technically it's active, as you're choosing your path, right? But you're kind of being led around, and that's kind of for me, that's the passive part of this, is you're just kind of going with the flow. The character is not really, character is a detective or as a cop or something like that, but they're not doing it. They're waiting like real life. Okay, so my wife and I love watching investigation discovery shows. We watch a ton of them. Okay, Polizon, 2020, all those. And a lot of times, especially if the crime happened in the 70s or 80s. So you have a wife is murdered. They think it's the husband. The husband's kind of a jerk. They're always having an affair. He's not very helpful. He lawyers up right away. And we can't prove that he killed her, but everybody knows he killed her. 20 years later, DNA and all this, and then they're like, well, let's retest all the stuff we've gotten. And it turns out he did not kill her. He didn't kill her at all. And it's some random guy, some drifter, that lived 4 blocks away that for no apparent reason decided to break into her house and kill her. And then that's the guy who goes to jail. Okay. So now reality is, hey, the guy got caught and we're happy about that. That's real life. If you write that out in book form, in story form, it's, oh, so this detective basically goes through all this stuff and never solves the case. And then 20 years later, he's retired and somebody else throws the DNA onto the CODIS app, and then they find this guy who wasn't even in the files, thousands of pages, and then the case is solved. Well, if your main character is the detective that went through all this and retired, that's a pretty boring story to follow his path. Because basically the end is he gets a phone call. He's sitting on the beach somewhere. He's out back fishing, and he gets a call. Hey, we caught him. Wasn't the husband that you thought this for 20 something years, 30, 40 years. It's this other random person that you've never heard of. Well, that makes for a pretty boring story. So I don't even know if I even explained that well. I explained it for me. Number 5. Never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you think of an everyday English equivalent. I think this is the I'm smart and I'm going to write words that make me look smart. Okay. And I use a lot of food. I use a lot of food, but I mean, I had, James Gaffney from the Dirty Deeds books went down to I think Brazil. And so I have a lot of food, Brazilian food, and I'm going to use their names for the food. I italicize it so it's a foreign word, I guess you would say. I'm not really big on. There's a lot of writers that I think do well with, say, their character is Spanish, okay, and so they are talking in Spanish or Spanglish or whatever, right? But as long as you can, as a reader and I do not speak Spanish, as long as you, as a reader, you can follow along, it's all right. But again, it's pulling me out of the story because I'm like, what does "Donde este la shampoo" mean? And that's, for some reason, that's some stupid thing that I learned from somebody and I can't get it out of my head. Probably the only Spanish I know. And so for me, it kind of takes me out of the story. And sometimes they'll be like, they'll have Spanish and then the character will go, oh, well, he wants to know why I was at the house. Then just say that. Okay. I get it. It adds flavor to the character. Dialogue, I'm not all that much. There's a problem with it because it separates the characters, the voices of the characters, and you know who's talking. But it's also a lot of times, okay, so I read an author that I like the person, but their first chapter of their book is about somebody, it's like a shipwreck thing. They're scuba diving. And the whole very long first chapter is about them diving down to this shipwreck, which is fine. But all the jargon of scuba diving is thrown into this first chapter. Okay. So you're like, oh, I don't care. Oh, I had to turn this on a PC 17, blah, blah, blah. And all the features of every single piece of equipment and on and on and on. And I'm just like, I'm bored. I'm like, I don't want a tutorial on scuba diving. I've never been scuba diving. I saw Jaws when I was a kid. I'm not ever going in the ocean. I'm definitely not going under the surface of I'm not doing this. You crazy, is cracking down there. So it immediately takes me out of the story, and I'm like, I don't want to read the rest of this book. And the author who wrote it is a scuba diver, and it's obvious they're a scuba diver. And I'm thinking, well, other scuba divers would maybe like this book. There's other authors that I'll read, and they give you just a little taste to let you in. Andrew Main is a great author. One of his series, the main character, she's a scuba diver, And he gives you just enough to understand. There might be like, well, I have to use this pressure or that. I have to use this specific equipment because of this, but it's a few sentences. It's a paragraph. It's not, we're going to go through all the tanks, and we're going to go through the specific P874C masks, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about all that stuff. There's also the writer out there who has done research on something. So in another writing video, I talked about, character worked in a sawmill, and I did a lot of research on turn of the century sawmills and stuff like that. And I did not want to add a tutorial on how to work in a sawmill. I just wanted it to be realistic enough that if anybody worked in a sawmill, or anybody's father or grandfather worked in a sawmill, they'll be like, okay, I get it. But you get those authors who will research something, and maybe it's not something they've ever done as a career, but it's something that they're interested in. And there's so much jargon, there's so much science and all this other stuff that again, as a reader, unless you're into that stuff, it takes you out of it. I don't read a lot of military thrillers because I've never been in the military. I've never I've held one weapon in my entire life, which was a Desert Eagle for about 4 minutes, never shot it or anything. So I'm not really big on military and all the jargon and all the other stuff. Okay. I'm not really big on that. And a lot of times, most of the time, the person is was in the military or still in the military, and they're writing. And yeah, I think it's good to come up with a specific weapon that a character is using instead of just saying, well, he pulled his handgun. No, you if it adds a little more if he says, oh, he pulled out a whatever, a Glock, specific Glock, or a Desert Eagle, blah blah, whatever, without going into the character pulled out his Desert Eagle, which with the extended clip, which has 14 shots and blah blah. I don't care about all that stuff. Just say you pulled out a Desert Eagle and then let's go kill somebody. You know what I'm saying? So I think sometimes we as writers, we tend to overdo it. And again, I think it goes back to how smart are the readers? The readers are pretty smart, and I don't think we sometimes realize that. So let's realize that. Number 6, the last rule for George Orwell's 6 Rules for Writing. Before we get into that, I want to say thank you, everybody, for hitting the subscribe button. Thank you, everybody, for watching videos. Thank you for everybody sharing this. I love comments. I also love more ideas for these writing videos. Every Wednesday and every Sunday, I put out a writing video like this. Could be on any subject. Has to do with writing. Could be on any subject that has to do with anything, to be honest with you. You want to know my recipe for pork roll, egg, and cheese? I'll give it to you. Number 6. Break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. Break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. I think that one kind of, I don't even know what he's even saying there. Break any of these rules sooner. I never even looked at this before I did this. Break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. I'm not smart enough to immediately know what that means. Do what you want to do. All these rules are every rule is made to be broken. Okay, that's my final take on all of this. Write a good book. There's tons of books out there that when you read, and I always go to The Road. Cormac McCarthy. The way he wrote that book shouldn't work. The way there's no dialogue tags, the way that it's structured, it's written, that book should not work. Probably one of my favorite books of all time. Definitely top 25. He tried something, but he did it well enough. Don Winslow will head jump within the same chapter, within 3-4 lines, character to character. It should not work. That's a rule. You're told not to stick to a point of view in each chapter, or do a chapter break and jump into the next head. He's doing it every other line. And you know what? It works because he's such a great writer. So rules are made to be broken. Orwell's 6 rules are a good reminder to anyone who proposes to communicate accurately. They have an enduring freshness to them, significant to all times and places. I agree. So here's the thing. These are rules made to be broken, but should they be broken? Should you automatically go, oh, these are I'm gonna do my own rules? If you're that good of a writer that you want to do anything you want to do, that's knock yourself out. I don't consider myself so great as a writer that I can just go, yeah, I'm gonna ignore all this stuff. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Have you thought about these things as a writer? Have you read these? Have you dismissed them? Do you follow them? Do you have this laminated and put on your wall near your writing space? I want to know. I want to know.